Welcome to Season 3 of the Twendé podcast. Twendé, meaning let's go in Kiswahili, is an accelerator focused on equipping Tennessee-based Black and Brown founders with the resources needed to grow and scale their businesses. I'm M. Wilder, Twendé Program Manager here at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, and your host of the Twendé podcast. We're grateful for support from the David and Rebecca Clements family with additional funding from the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. Thank you for believing in our mission. For past seasons and our latest episodes, visit ec.co/Twendé podcast. Let's go. What's good, everybody? Today we are here with Warren Sadler, CTO and co-founder of Therify, and his co-founder, James Edward Murray, who is also the CEO of Therify. I just want to say welcome to y'all. So happy you're here.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Beautiful. So we're going to jump in as we normally do. I'm going to kick it to you, Warren, first. Can you talk about, just to ground us in this conversation, think about your starting five. So who are the five people, groups, institution, entities that are keeping you progressing in life and business?
Oh, man. No, we talked earlier about like themes of people. It's kind of hard to pin it down to just five. And, it makes me think, of course, family. We all share something, I'm sure we'll talk about it later, just in our history where family plays a big role in who we are, how we show up every single day. And, for me, that is the driving factor, right? I think about something that James and I talk about often, legacy. And so family plays into that. I think about our team, and when you say like five people, it's funny. It's like, aside from James and I, there are five people on that team. And so I was like, man, that's kind of poignant. And so I wanted to speak to that in the sense that we spoke on this morning in our stand-up, where I think with what we're doing as a company, we have an incredible opportunity to make change in the world. And I think in some ways make the world a better place. And I think about those five people, the five people they can impact, five people they can impact. And so I think of it in like this multiplicative sort of way where, I think we're starting with something kind of small, but that grows over time. And so I don't know if that's like a good answer, like a halfway answer, but it's what came to mind, trying to speak from the heart in that way.
I got you. Thank you. Thank you, Warren. What about you, James?
Yeah, so I got to start with my dad, for sure. He passed when I was young. I was 12 when he passed away, but, I've had the opportunity to learn more about his legacy as an adult, and he's someone who, committed his life to helping others heal, helping build community and supporting people in a multitude of ways. And so, I think in my adult years have really tried to continue his legacy of service in healing others. I got to shout out my mom as well. Having lost my dad at 12, she had to raise, me and my two siblings by herself, put us all through college. She's one of the strongest people I know and just inspires me every day. To Warren's point, I really got to shout out our team at Therify. I think when you start a company, you're initially motivated by solving a problem, but then you get accompanied by a group of people who become just as passionate as you are about solving that problem, and then you want to be successful for them as well. I got to shout out Howard University. I'm a proud HBCU alum. Howard was, the first. I grew up in predominantly white neighborhoods, and so going to an HBCU first environment I've been in where people talked about being Black like it was a good thing. And that just motivated me, gave me so much confidence as a Black man. And then I also, certainly other Black founders, entrepreneurs who are building things or have built things from scratch. I think about people like Marcus Whitney, for sure, who is one of Therify's investors and has just done great things, inside and outside of the city of Nashville from an entrepreneurial perspective. That's my top five.
I love it. I love it. So continuing with just some of the kind of storytelling that you both kind of dipped your toe in, let's talk a little bit about Therify, and maybe bringing things back to just how the company started. I feel like there's this thread of similarity in terms of that the three of us have lost our fathers. I think I'm like a little over a year out from that time and season. But just thinking about legacy and James, some of what you shared. What are some of those personal experiences that played a huge role in the founding of Therify. And where are you at kind of today?
Yeah, so this company certainly is a function of personal experience for both Warren and I. For me, it started off with that process of seeking support for grief and loss and depression, from just that ongoing experience of coping with losing my dad. And I never thought I would be the type of person to, seek out therapy. But when you realize that you can't get through grief by yourself and you need help, that changes your perspective. And so I remember, this was probably about 2018, deciding that I was going to go to therapy and thinking that it would be an easy process, right? Like I'd be able to just go to some directory, click a button and start. And it was the exact opposite, right? Ended up scrolling through, dozens of pages of a directory and having no idea who's available, who's going to be a good fit for me, reaching out to providers who didn't respond to me. And that was just really difficult, right? I think when you're already struggling, right? Ideally, that experience of getting care, when you have the courage to say, I want to seek care, it should be easy. And so, I ended up, reaching out to dozens of providers, going through 5 or 6 consultations before finding a good fit. And I think what really, motivated me to, want to solve this problem in a bigger way and team up with Warren was, seeing so many friends and family members go through that same process of trying to access care, giving up and not getting the care that they so desperately needed. That was heartbreaking. And so, fast forward, 6 years later, Therify is an in-network mental health platform. We partner with employers. We make it really easy for their employees to access in-network mental health providers. And so we have a network of in-network providers in over 30 states at this point. And we use technology, we call it care navigation, to match the individuals with their ideal provider, often within minutes or, days, right? So you're accessing care much faster and much more efficiently.
Look, sign me up. Yeah, I can remember when I started my therapy journey, and I think I may have read an interview with you, James, just about when the moment in therapy when you actually have to take on the labor of explaining some sort of lived experience, whether race, queerness, just something at a very basic level. And I remember even at a younger age, swiping all the way left, no, this is not going to work. This is not going to work. And trying to figure out as a younger person, how do where do I go to on the front end, try to narrow my pool of folks who are going to provide what at that time was critical mental health supports. So I'm really excited. I'm excited for what you all continue to build. Warren, anything from you just on, as you think back to this idea, how did the two of you talk about that connection? Why are the two of you sitting here together?
The threads are kind of surreal when we take a step back and we tell the story. It feels like every time we talk about how our lives sort of converge together, we always find something new. And so you mentioned 2018. 2018 is actually the year my father passed. And it was around that time, I know I'm going through it. And James says, no, man, you should consider therapy. It's a resource. It's a thing you can do to get through this moment. Because I think I don't know if I expected that moment in my time or my life to impact me the way that it did. Because I think my father and I had a good relationship, but it was strained towards the latter parts of his life. And, his passing, I think, really altered me. And I don't know if I thought therapy was a career path for me either. So did I ever think I would find myself in a company? I knew healthcare maybe, right? I was working at HCA when James and I met, actually, and we'll touch on sort of that thread as well. And I honestly feel in a profound way for me, that journey of making sense of who I am, my past, who my father was, all of that, it's therapeutic, right? That's the work. And in some ways, I feel like it's dramatic irony, whatever it may be, but that's where I find myself, is in this sort of this space. And then, touching on how we met each other, there is a sort of through line with the Entrepreneur Center as well. Michael Burcham, founder of the EC, was also James' instructor at Vanderbilt. And so shared mentor there. In fact, one of the startups that I worked on coming out of the EC, I started here as a graphic design consultant at the EC. And through that was connected through a mutual friend who hits me up one day and says, hey, I got this guy. He's in my program, this class starting the venture. You should meet him. And I go to Closing Bell at Vanderbilt, and there's this guy, James, and he's pitching me on this idea, this startup he wants to put together. And I'm like, I think the idea's got legs, but I think there's something about James, and I was like, this is pretty special, And so I think the rest is kind of history. There's more to it for sure, but I'll let you sort of tell your part of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is something that a lot of non-technical founders go through, right? When you have an idea, you want to build it, but you're like, how?
Yes.
I do not write code. I do not understand. And so, for me, being at Vanderbilt and having the opportunity, and I got my MBA from Vanderbilt to try to incubate a business, pitching the idea and reaching out to classmates and saying, hey, who do you know who is technical that might be able to support me? And I remember the first time that Warren and I met, and I pitched him an idea, and within a matter of minutes, he, in very clear detail, described how he would build it, right? And I was just like, this guy's, he's way too, like, he could be doing much bigger things, right, than pursue this crazy startup idea with me. But I think, what was most important in that time is I think we had similar values, right? About the way we wanted to build a company, about how we treat people, the way that we wanted to build a team. And that more than anything, I think really bonded us in the beginning. And, it was like dating a little bit at first.
That's
right?
real.
It was like dating a little bit. And, we spent some time and, after a little while decided that we wanted to dig in and really commit to building a company together.
Look at y'all.
Yeah.
It is cute to see like co-founders like telling the story of like when it all began, and you're both just like smiling so big. It's really it's amazing. It really is, and I think that it's rare, and you probably don't give yourselves as much credit for like leaning in and continuing to build with one another. You mentioned the values piece, and I'd love to hear you both just speak to like how do you make this a co-founder like relationship a successful one? Can you kind of take a minute and just speak to what that looks like, the conscious, the subconscious, like how does that work?
I'll start with that one. I think you really have to treat it like a relationship, right? In the sense of like, communication, right? Being on the same page. The thing is, building something from scratch is one of the hardest things you're ever going to do, right? And when you bring two people in a room with two different perspectives, there are going to be times when you disagree, right? But I think as long as you make that communication healthy, right? You say, hey man, like this is bothering me, right? And you don't kind of internalize things, right? Without expressing them. Right. And that's something that we've gone through, right, as co-founders, right? We both care so much about making this company successful. And so what I'm really proud of in terms of our growth as co-founders is the ability to have the really difficult conversations, right? It's so, so important, even when you disagree, to be able to repair and remind yourselves, like, man, I love you, man. And, we're on the same team. We're working toward the same goal, and we can be successful together. And so, Warren not only is he's my co-founder, he's one of my best friends. And so, one of the number one reasons that startups fail is because of co-founder conflict, right? And so I'm just really proud of our communication and putting a lot of work into it, right? I think it's important.
Thank you, James.
It has to be said, love you too, bro. That's what that's saying, but that's the whole point. You say it. I mean, I think it's kind of meta in that way. We're a therapy company, and I think it would be hypocritical to not really invest in what that looks like. There are plenty of schools of thoughts on this, and I've been fortunate. I touch on our team, Dr. Claire Rocasado-Bacale, Leland Nazarino, Alana Somekian, clinicians we work with, and we'll have conversations, and they'll bring up something like Gottman theory, which is sort of like relationship theory. And they touch on this rupture and repair. Rupture is going to happen. It's inevitable. In fact, like the anti-pattern is not having conflict. It's really more so how do you intend to come back to one another? And it's always starting with just what James said is like, I don't think there's anything he would do that would put the company in jeopardy or our relationship in jeopardy. And I trust that. And that's the foundation. Now, are we going to have misunderstandings because we have different perspectives? 100%, right? We have different lives. We share a lot of similarities, but we're still different people. And so I think it's learning to embrace that and say, in fact, I'm probably better because I incorporate James's perspective. And so I think you could even be, if you necessarily don't fall into the more emotional or like soft feelings about it, I think it's very logical to say that I benefit from the perspective of another person when making really big decisions on what are we building here? What problem are we solving? And then, who are we and are we better because of this conversation? And I've never, I don't think, no matter how hard the moment has been, it's always been, well, are you okay? Are we okay? Then if that's okay, then Therify will be okay.
Right. There's clearly a lot of care there. And to your point, just this idea that conflict, rupture happens, but it's like how and where a lot of people, I think, make mistakes or like exist in a state of conflict is that they don't really know how. There's no conversation about how we're going to move forward.
It's like we don't have that language, right? I think we all come from different households and different perspectives where, the pattern may be we have the fight and we don't talk about it. But I think what you start to realize when you're building a company, those behaviors, they tend to ripple out into the teams, into how you show up and work. And what I think we've recognized is like, that's our obligation as leaders, as co-founders with one another, is to how you model those things to a team, because that impacts the customer, because the team imparts that to the customer. If they're stressed because you create a stressed environment, that ripples out through the whole company. And so, even though we may not have the examples, we have the obligation to learn the patterns and really improve from that. And so, it's
absolutely
a journey.
Absolutely. So I want to shift a little bit and give you all the opportunity to talk just about raising capital. Particularly in the Twendé program, we talk a lot about, we try to just diversify our the knowledge we're providing around capital, right? I think traditionally we think about VC funding, and we've all read or been forwarded the staggering statistics with regard to Black founders who receive VC funds. Maybe we can do a little demystifying or just with regard to that process. Can you two share a little bit about some defining moments for Therify with regard to raising? What it was, $3.4 million in 2 rounds, and getting ready to raise again?
Yeah, so we initially raised in 2021 $1.4 million pre-seed round, and then late 2023 did a $2 million seed round. And raising capital for sure is not an enjoyable experience, right? It's and especially we see the statistics to your point around Black founders, and so. A couple of defining moments for us. I think the first was certainly getting the Y Combinator. So that's a startup accelerator that is, I guess, pretty well known by now. Some Airbnb, Stripe, so on and so forth. And I think for us it was so important. I maybe had a personal relationship with one venture capital investor prior to getting into Y Combinator, and so I think it was so important for us to be able to aggregate demand and VC demand in one place, right? And so through demo day, we were able to pitch in front of, hundreds of investors that we just wouldn't have had access to otherwise. And so I think we were fortunate. We had to do very little kind of cold outbound, right? And so the thing that I always recommend to other founders, other Black founders especially, is to try to get into an accelerator where you can make those connections to investors in a more efficient way. I think the other thing that was really key for us was kind of playing the long game, right? And so when I think about our $2 million seed round in 2023, which was led by Marcus Whitney and Jumpstart Nova, our first conversation with Marcus was 2 years prior, right?
Yeah.
And, I have to remember that VCs they're not investing their own money, they're investing the money of others, right? Of their limited partners. And so they, for good reason, they're money managers. They have to be very careful and very selective with how they allocate capital. And so I had to remind myself, those checks aren't always going to come overnight. And I think you have to be willing to build a relationship with an investor, keep them informed over time, and show them your progress, right? And so you can build that trust to the extent that they will write a check, right? It's not always going to happen overnight. And I think you just have to be very persistent in that. I think altogether, we've got maybe about 16 investors, including angels and venture capital funds, and we've pitched over 150, right? The first 50 that we pitched to said no. And so playing the long game, right, I think has been really critical to our success in fundraising.
No, thank you. Warren, do you want to add anything to that?
Gosh, I mean, it feels like a revelation, but I think it's something that's been consistent for us in the story is, not everyone is for you, and that's a good way, right? That's a good thing because I think it allows you to have focus and to, when you pitch to a VC and they're not getting it, it's like, okay, you kind of have to move on. That's the game. He said to that point around persistence. That's what it takes to do this, to create a company, to hear those no's, is you're committed to your vision. And yes, you learn. I'm not saying you are sort of a brick wall where there's no feedback, but I think there's some simplicity in recognizing that there will be VCs who understand the problem, who align to the space. It is like a sales process. Do you understand their thesis, their vision for how they want to deploy capital? And doing that work, that diligence to align those things, it's what makes good VC investment, what makes good customers, what makes good co-founders. Is we talk about values. Jumpstart Nova, for example, really believes in this fact that underrepresented founders have an incredible opportunity to really shape innovation. And that's a thesis that we align with. It's who we are. And that's what allowed us to have an opportunity with Nova to raise the capital that we did. And so the through line there is honestly sticking to your values. And I mean, we could tell the story of Michael Seibel at Y Combinator and how that played out, but it's a story of just that, sticking to principle.
I'll quickly tell that story.
I was gonna say there's no pressure from me, but would love to hear.
I'll quickly tell that story. So Y Combinator, the reason there was so much at stake for us was because we were trying to figure out how to leave our jobs, right, to build this company full time, right? I think it's so hard to make that leap. And so getting into an accelerator and getting an initial 125K, right, investment would allow us to do that. And so I think the acceptance rate in Y Combinator is like 5% or something ridiculous like that. And so when we interviewed, we were fortunate to get an interview. What the process is supposed to look like is one 10-minute interview, right? And then you basically find out if you're getting into the program and you get the investment. And so we did our 10-minute interview, and afterward, they got back to us and they were like, "We're actually not sure. Let's have another call," right? We do another 10-minute interview. Michael Seibel comes back to us, and mind you, we're pitching Therify, right? We're pitching an in-network mental health platform, right? And at the time, we still are. We had this emphasis on, matching folks with culturally competent providers. And so Michael comes back to us and says, actually, I think the reason that, underrepresented folks are depressed is because they can't get promoted at work. Right? And we're like, that's interesting. And so he's like, James, you worked at Facebook. Warren, you worked at McKinsey. Like, you all know how to get promoted. You should basically do like a coaching platform that helps folks get promoted and, climb the corporate ladder. And so he's like, think about it and get back to me. Right. And so we're like, oh my God, and so Warren and I, and Jesse, our other team member, we talked about it. We were like, do we want to change our idea to get into Y Combinator, or do we want to stick to our convictions about the problem that we are solving and what we're building? And the three of us ultimately made a decision that, we're going to stick to what we initially set out to build, right? We have conviction in it. We believe in it. And so we get back on the phone with Michael and said, hey, appreciate your suggestion, but, we're going to keep doing what we're doing, fully expecting that he was going to be like, all right, thanks.
Right.
See you next time.
Yep, see ya.
Peace. And so instead he was like, that's great. Do you want to join the batch? And we were like, what? And so what he said to us was, if I can get a founder to change their idea, that is a bad sign. It was a test. It was a test to see how much conviction and belief we had in what we were building.
I've just recently recovered from that. That was traumatic for me.
And so, huge lesson there, right? You have to have belief in the problem that you're solving and feel, connected to it, because building a startup is hard. And so if someone's going to give you money to build it, they want to know that you're really in it. Huge lesson learned.
Yeah, I don't know that I've ever heard a story that, like, underline bold, you have to believe in what you're building. I don't know if I've ever heard a story that has kind of highlighted that truth more so than that one. Wow. And Warren, you said you're just recently recovering from the...
No, it's that continuous lesson. I think for us, at the very least, where that is the tenor of the conversation. We've been fortunate to work with some pretty amazing people. Think about like Chris Bakke, a GTM coach of ours, who, we get to have these conversations, maybe an hour at a time. He's exited now twice, just recently leaving X, a company that he sold was acquired by X and now is on to something else. And he just gives us this sort of insight that I think speaks to who we are as people. And I think the journey is always saying, well, maybe you try this, maybe you try that. And what I've appreciated, even his perspective, he said the best sales, the best teams, 51% altruistic, 49% selfish. And that is something that resonates with me, because I think in the sense of how I operate, how I think about teams and culture and product and all these things, is like, how much good can we create in this space? And I think there's often this pull of like, well, maybe you can't. Maybe there is like this slimy underbelly, this thing that doesn't really align with, I think, goodness in the world. And I think that's been, at least for us, I maybe it doesn't check out for everyone, but for us in the Therify journey, it's more true than anything, is how do you give back? How do you create more opportunity, more value for people? And sticking to that conviction. That's the journey for us. That's the lesson for us.
So I'd love to share with listeners just a kind of a little bit about the impact of Therify. So do either of you want to take that one and run with it?
I'll tell a quick story. One of my favorite stories about a Therify member who utilized our product. I think it speaks to the impact that we're having. So there's a particular member who came to us from their employer. They learned about Therify through their employer and said, me and my partner are really going through it right now, right? We're not doing well. We're getting in arguments, right? We're not on the same page. And she told me that if I don't get a therapist for us, if we don't try to work this out through therapy, that it's over, right? This is basically the last chance. And for this particular person, he was scared. He was very scared. This is the person who he wanted to marry. the person who he saw spending the rest of his life with, right? And so there was a lot at stake for him in this particular moment. And so we took that very seriously. And so within a matter of about 24 hours, we were able to recommend a really great couples therapist, right, for he and his partner to start seeing, so they could get started as quickly as possible, right? And so a really nice thing about Therify as well is that you get matched with a care navigator. So this is someone who's like your co-pilot in the process, and they just check in with you as you're going through your care to see how it's going, to make sure that it's going well. And I remember a couple weeks later, we checked in with him, our care navigator checked in with him, and he said, therapy is going really great. We've been going on a weekly basis. Our communication is improving, and therapy is becoming part of our routine. He said, it's becoming so part of our routine that it feels like going for a morning walk. Mm-hmm. And I just always remember that, right? Someone saying, this feels as simple and routine as going for a morning walk. And because of this experience, my partner and I are on a better trajectory, right? We're going to be okay. And for him, it was deeper than that. It was, okay, I'm going to have the opportunity to build my life with this person who I love so much. And so stories like that just mean the world. Warren talks about our ability to change lives. We're literally doing it every day by giving people the opportunity to repair relationships, to become more self-aware, to heal parts of themselves that allow them to become, the best version of themselves. So that's a story I think that really speaks to the impact that we're having.
So thank you for sharing that story about an individual user who's obviously benefited greatly from Therify. Can you talk a little bit or elaborate on some of who your other customers are?
Yeah, so we've been really fortunate to work with employers ranging from 500 employees to employers as big as 10,000 employees. And so we really like the employer space because it allows us to access a lot of people at the same time that we can help. And so we primarily work across a few verticals, tech. We work with Indeed, Data Miner, Thumbtack, financial services. We work with financial services firms like Warburg Pincus, for example. And then we also work with a lot of ad agencies. And so there are two large ad agency holding companies we support, including Omnicom Media, as well as Publicis Media, and continuing to expand on the verticals that we support.
No, and I think that really shines through. So thank you. I do want to talk a little bit about and thinking about what is next for Therify. So when you think, obviously, I think mentioned you'll be going into another raise, going in, like maybe at the top of the year. So yeah, I would just love to hear about what's next. 5 years, 10 years plus. Like what are y'all looking? What's your North Star?
It's so interesting because so much can happen in a month, right? So we're like, 5 years. It's incredible to think about what the business could look like. But I think in the immediate term, within the next 12 months, I'd say we want to continue to differentiate ourselves in the market as the in-network platform for mental health. We strongly believe that in-network care is the best source, most sustainable source of long-term mental health care. We know that mental health is not like breaking a leg where you can predict how long you're going to need it, right? I'm still in therapy, right? And so you can't predict with things like grief, depression, anxiety, how long it's going to take. And so you really need that affordable kind of funding source for your care. And so, we want to continue to differentiate ourselves in that way and become the platform for that. But now extrapolating that out to 5 years, I think there's so much possibility. I think that mental health is just the start, right? I think in-network care is so important for every form of care. I could see us incorporating things like, the ability to find a great primary care doctor, right? My partner and I just went through IVF, right? And so, being able to find a great provider around, for my partner, right? Around things like that. I just think the types of care that we can expand to are kind of limitless within the scope of in-network affordable coverage. And so I'm really excited to see how we continue to grow there.
Absolutely. And we are real quick thinking, look, I'm sending all the vibes to you and your partner as you embark on, I know what could be a long, short, somewhere in between journey, but
Thank you.
Yeah, sending all the vibes.
Thank you.
And thank you for sharing that. All right, Warren,
Ooh.
what are you thinking? Let's do 12 months, but I'm manifesting 5-10 years.
Okay. No, I think James is right. We look at the space, we look at really this sort of world where there is the health plan, and then there tends to be the EAP, and those systems don't always talk to one another. And I think we know this. I had a chance to experience this working at Hospital Corporation of America, just how hard it is for even well-intentioned clinicians to deliver care appropriately to people that doesn't impact them negatively financially. We talk about out-of-network fee, how damaging that could be to someone just because you saw a clinician who wasn't in plan, and now that's your bill, and now that bill is late, and now that negatively impacts almost every aspect of your life. And so, we think the mandate is actually pretty large in that sense, that to help people sort of find their way to the appropriate level of care in network that lets them use their benefit. We're paying for it every single month in our paychecks. It's coming out, but we don't get to experience that. We don't get to experience the value of that. And clinicians themselves are also burdened with that navigation process. How do they help their patients really take the full effect of the benefit? And so we see a massive opportunity there to really just align those incentives. Employers want it, the employees want it, the clinicians want to give it, but we have a really complicated system. And I think that's where we really come into play. And I think that is, even as big as that is, that's a 12-month plan. And to James's point, you look at other service lines, other opportunities there to say that this, again, is like one of the biggest costs in the healthcare system is the out-of-network cost. And that's where we're just seeing so much waste in the healthcare system. And so, yeah, we think the problem's massive, but, we're starting where it hits home for us, which is the behavioral health piece.
Well, we're gonna wrap up, but I want to do something real quick. Especially as you all get to, again, going into your raise, thinking about the next 12 months, acknowledging that month to month, a month from now could just be a whole different vibe.
Yes.
I want to give you both opportunity to just say some kind of words of affirmation to one another of just just take a moment. Have a little moment of what do you want to tell James as you get ready for this next season that you feel like could be helpful? Something that you can give James as your co-founder moves into the next 12 months of life in the business. And James, same to you. What do you want to say to Warren as you move forward for the next 12 months? Something that you feel like he could use.
Well, I don't mind starting there, man. It's this is a difficult journey, and I don't think there's anyone I would rather do this with or build something with, something as audacious as thinking you can change the world. I mean, that's something I see you do every single day, and just to help you feel and know that I support you, man. I have no doubt that you can do that. And I think it's in that capacity for great change is also just a really kind heart. And I don't want you to lose that no matter what, along the way. And so, yeah, man, I got you, bro.
Appreciate you, man. Oh man, I mean, I could talk forever, about Warren, about you, I think the beauty of our relationship as co-founders and friends is the way that we complement one another. And you are just such a good leader, right? And motivator, and mobilizer of people, right? Through change, through hard times, through ambiguity. And that is so important in what we're doing. We're literally creating something special, something impactful from the ground up, from nothing. And your ability to organize all of the work that we do and keep people aligned. There's just no way that we would be here without you. And I think we're creating a really solid foundation for our future success, right? And when I say success, I'm talking about not just the growth of our business, but the impact that we're going to have on others, right? And that wouldn't be possible without, everything you contribute. So we're just warming up, my brother.
Just warming up, man.
We're just warming up. So I'm excited.
I love it. Let's go. Look, I'm excited.
Let's go.
I'm like, I need a Therify shirt, swag hat. I'm ready to be an ambassador. Yeah, and I just ask that you all continue to just spread that goodness, and I wish you all of the luck moving forward. I'm excited for so many more conversations, and I think our listeners will really enjoy this one too. So with that, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. And thanks to the David and Rebecca Clemens family, along with funding support from Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee, for making this podcast possible. From the Chase Studio at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, I'm M. Wilder, inviting you to engage with our Twendé Accelerator program by visiting ec.co/Twendé.